With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will remind the House that the Foreign Office has been responding to two crises this past week. My honourable friend, Minister Faulkner, will update the government's extensive effort to assist those whose loved ones lost their lives in Thursday's devastating Air India plane crash. Just 9 days ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was in Delhi, strengthening our friendship. Our nations are mourning together, and my thoughts are with those suffering such terrible loss. With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will now turn to the Middle East. Early last Friday morning, Israel launched extensive strikes across Iran, targets including military sites, including the uranium enrichment facility at Natanz, and key commanders and nuclear scientists. The last 72 hours has seen Iranian ballistic missiles and drone strikes across Israel, killing at least 21 Israelis and injuring hundreds more. And Israeli strikes have continued, including on targets in Tehran, with the Iranian authorities reporting scores of civilian casualties. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said his operations will continue for as many days as it takes to remove the threat. Supreme Leader Khamenei has said Israel must expect severe punishment. Madam Deputy Speaker, in such crisis, our first priority is the welfare, of course, of British nationals. On Friday, we swiftly stood up a crisis team in London and the region, and yesterday I announced that we now advise against all travel to Israel, as well as our long-standing travel advice of not travelling to Iran. Madam Deputy Speaker, today I can update the House that we are asking all British nationals in Israel to register their presence with the FCDO so that we can share important information on the situation and leaving the country. And I can announce today that we are further also updating our travel advice to signpost border crossing points and sending rapid deployment teams to Egypt and to Jordan to bolster our consular presence near the border with Israel, which has already been supporting British nationals on the ground. Israel and Iran have closed their airspace until further notice, and our ability, therefore, to provide support in Iran is extremely limited. British nationals in the region should closely monitor our travel advice for further updates. Madam Deputy Speaker, the situation remains fast-moving. We expect more strikes in the days to come. This is a moment of great danger for the region. And I want to be clear, the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes against Iran. This is a military action conducted by Israel. It should come as no surprise that Israel considers the Iranian nuclear program an existential threat. Khamenei said in 2018 that Israel was a cancerous tumour that should be removed and eradicated. We have always supported Israeli security. That's why Britain has sought to prevent Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon through extensive diplomacy. We agree with President Trump when he says negotiations are necessary and must lead to a deal. That has long been the view, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the so-called E3, Britain, France and Germany, with whom we've worked so closely on this issue. The view of all the G7, who have backed the efforts of President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and for more than 2 decades, the cross-party view in this House. Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton and Lord Haig of Richmond led diplomatic efforts on the issue. Baroness May of Maidenhead and the former Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge did too. and this government has continued to pursue negotiations, joining France and Germany in 5 rounds of talks with Iran this year alone. Ours is a hard-headed, realist assessment of how best to tackle this grave threat. Fundamentally, no military action can put an end to Iran's nuclear capabilities. Madam Deputy Speaker, just last week, the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors passed a non-compliance resolution against Iran, the first such IAEA finding in 14 years. The Director General's comprehensive report details Iran's failure to declare nuclear materials. Iran remains the only state without nuclear weapons accumulating uranium at such dangerously high levels. Its total enriched stockpile is now 40 times the limit in the JCPOA. And their nuclear program is part of a wider pattern of destabilizing activity. The government has taken firm action in response. When they transferred ballistic missiles for use in Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, we imposed extensive sanctions, including against Iran Air, and cancelled our bilateral air services agreement. In the face of unacceptable IRGC threats here in the UK, with some 20 foiled plots since 2022, the Crown Prosecution Service has for the first time charged Iranian nationals under the National Security Act. And we've placed the Iranian state, including the IRGC, on the enhanced tier of the new Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. Madam Deputy Speaker, a widening war would have grave and unpredictable consequences, including for our partners in Jordan and the Gulf. The horrors of Gaza worsening, tensions in Lebanon, Syria and Iraq rising, and the Houthi threat continuing. That's why the government's firm view, as it was last October in the ballistic missile attack on Israel, is that further escalation in the Middle East is not in Britain's interests, nor the interests of Israel, Iran or the region. There are hundreds of thousands of British nationals living in the region, and with Iran a major oil producer and 1/5 of the total world's oil consumption flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, escalating conflict poses real risks for the global economy. As missiles rain down, Israel has a right to defend itself and its citizens. But our priority now is de-escalation. Our message to both Israel and Iran is clear. Step back, show restraint, don't get pulled ever deeper into a catastrophic conflict whose consequences nobody can control. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister chaired COBRA on the situation last Friday and spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Trump, and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He is now, of course, at the G7 summit in Canada, discussing with our closest allies how to ease tensions. And the government has deployed additional assets to the region, including jets, for contingency support to UK forces and potentially our regional allies concerned about the escalated conflict. In the last 72 hours, my honourable friend, the Minister for the Middle East, and I have been flat out trying to carve out space for diplomacy. I have spoken to both Israeli Foreign Minister Saar and Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi, underlying Britain's focus on de-escalation. I have also met with the Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal. I've had calls with US Secretary Rubio, EU High Representative Kallas, and my counterparts from France, from Germany, from the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Oman, Jordan, Turkey and Iraq. These conversations are part of a collective drive to prevent a spiralling conflict. Madam Deputy Speaker, this new crisis has arisen as the appalling situation in Gaza continues. This weekend, hospitals in Gaza reported over 50 people were killed and more than 500 injured while trying to access food. This government will not take our eye off the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. We will not stop calling for aid restrictions to be lifted and an immediate ceasefire, and we will not forget about the hostages. This morning I met with Yocheved Lefshitz and her family, whose courage and dignity in the face of Hamas barbarism was a reminder of the plight of those still cruelly held in Gaza. We will not stop striving to free the hostages and end the war. Madam Deputy Speaker, our vision remains unchanged: an end to Iran's nuclear program and destabilizing regional activity, Israel secure in its borders and at peace with its neighbors, a sovereign Palestinian state as part of the two-state solution. Diplomacy is indispensable to each of these goals. Britain will keep pressing all sides to choose a diplomatic path out of this crisis. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. These are deeply dangerous times, and as the Foreign Secretary has already said, last week's IAEA report makes it abundantly clear that Iran's nuclear program has grown, with their stockpile of enriched uranium passing 400 kg and being enriched to 60%, which it has widely been noted is a level unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons and beyond the need for any civilian use. The IAEA Director General also stated that Iran's actions and failure to cooperate has led to a significant reduction in the agency's ability to verify whether Iran's nuclear program is entirely peaceful. We share those concerns, and the reasons why Iran must never obtain nuclear weapons are clear. The Iranian regime is a prolific state sponsor of terrorism, with a stated intention to annihilate the world's only Jewish state. Given these concerns and the clear threat Iran poses, not only to Israel, but to the wider regional stability, Israel has the right to act in self-defense to degrade Iran's nuclear infrastructure. As well as posing a threat to Israel, Iran poses a direct threat to the United Kingdom and our interest. The Minister for the Middle East stated in April in a written parliamentary answer that Iran's nuclear program has never been more advanced and threatens international peace and security. And earlier this month, the Strategic Defence Review stated that Iran's escalating nuclear program presents a risk to international security and the global non-proliferation architecture. With that in mind, can the Foreign Secretary tell us what discussions he has had with the IAEA and give us his assessment on how close Iran was to having nuclear weapon capabilities that could strike Israel and our interests in the region? Given the report from the IAEA earlier this week, what direct bilateral discussions have government ministers had with their Israeli counterparts on this matter in the last few days prior to the action that was undertaken last week? He has spoken about conversations since the strikes commenced on Friday, but what discussions took place in the days preceding? Can the Foreign Secretary update us on the discussions with our partners in the region before the strikes on Friday? And since, for example, what discussions he's had with our friends in Bahrain in light of the ceasefire agreement and with Jordan in light of the previous airspace violations by Iran? Are these discussions purely diplomatic or do they cover defensive military planning? Last week on the 10th of June, during his statement, the Middle East minister said that they were in contact with the Israeli government that day. As that was after the IAEA report on the 9th of June, can the Foreign Secretary say during those discussions whether the nuclear threat from Iran and the IAEA assessment was discussed, or were they discussed in other matters? We also know from recent statements from the minister that relations between this government and Israel have become strained since last July. So what message does the Foreign Secretary have to all those who are concerned that constructive dialogue and diplomacy with Israel is not taking place? And with British nationals in Israel and the wider region, what efforts are underway to expeditiously help those who want to return to the UK to come back? And while the Foreign Secretary cannot rightly give operational details to the House, can he confirm if contingency plans have been updated recently for the evacuation of British personnel and assets from Iran? At the G7, will the Prime Minister be having substantive bilateral discussions with President Trump on this matter? On Iran strikes at Israel, These are indiscriminately targeting civilians, and the whole House should condemn Iran for doing this. The UK has previously supported Israel in defending them from missile and drone attacks. So can the Foreign Secretary confirm if the UK has offered military intelligence and other forms of assistance to our Israeli allies in countering these attacks from Iran? The German Chancellor has offered this and is providing assistance to Israel. Has the UK made such an offer too? It is right that UK military capabilities have been increased in the region over the weekend. So can the Foreign Secretary tell the House whether he's prepared to take any retaliation, prepared to tackle any retaliation from Iran and its proxies, including the Houthis? Madam Deputy Speaker, although Iran's nuclear capabilities have been degraded, they are, as we know, in regular contact on nuclear issues with China and Russia, and have been for some time. Has the Foreign Secretary assessed the involvement of Russia and China that it may have had in supporting Iran's nuclear programme to get to where it is today? Is he concerned that they will support Iran to rebuild their capability with materials and expertise following Israel's actions? And is he looking at applying sanctions, new sanctions, to constrain Iran's ability to rebuild, advance and accelerate their nuclear ambitions? Turning to the direct threats that Iran poses to our soil, the Foreign Secretary has rightly mentioned the plots foiled, the recent attacks, the recent arrests, and putting Iran on the enhanced tier of furs. Can he give an assurance about work taking place across government over the last few days, including with the Home Office, the police, counter-terrorism operations and intelligence services, to tackle any retaliation that Iran, the IRGC, and those acting on its behalf might direct towards us? Has the threat risk level been reassessed? Is extra support being provided to secure synagogue schools and parts of the Jewish community in the UK? We all want to see peace and stability in the region, where Iran, who is responsible for so much bloodshed, is now taking place. So can the Foreign Secretary finally update the House on the ongoing steps being taken to secure the return of the hostages from Hamas captivity, the work to get more aid into Gaza, and efforts to bring about a sustainable ceasefire?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Shadow Foreign Secretary for her remarks, the cross-party support that I sensed in her remarks, and for the questions that I will certainly endeavour to answer. She asks about our contact with the IAEA. I can confirm that I spoke to the Director Grossi just a few days ago, and certainly before the action last week, and discussed his report. She asks what the latest is on that, and she will know that the assessment was that the enriched uranium stockpile was now standing at 8,413 kilograms, more than 40 times the JCPO limit, and the total high enriched uranium stockpiles was considered 9 significant quantities of high enriched uranium. She asked then what coordination we had given that information, and I want to reassure her that I have been in close touch, working in concert with my French and German colleagues over this period, and coordinating the three of us, working across our political directors, but also as foreign ministers in our messaging to the Iranian regime. And can I confirm to her that we will be speaking to the Iranian regime again in the coming hours to raise those concerns and heighten what I said about the need for diplomacy at this time. She asks quite properly about our long-standing relationship with Bahrain, and can I confirm that the Minister for the Middle East has spoken to Bahrain. She asks about our long-standing relationship with Jordan, and can I confirm that, of course, I've spoken to Foreign Minister Safadi in the last few days, and we continue to coordinate with our Jordanian friends and offer whatever support we can at this time. She asks, obviously, about our ongoing relationship with Israel. She will know that our relationship with Israel remains a complex and intense one, and as she would expect, I have spoken to Foreign Minister Saar on numerous occasions, and of course spoke to him again. He was in a bunker when I spoke to him on Saturday, separated from his family. I offered him condolences, and of course, as you would expect, the United Kingdom and Israel in these times, of course, coordinate and work together. We have disagreements, of course, and we've discussed that over this dispatch box, particularly about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. But we recognise that there are many Israelis, as we speak, in their bunkers, that there have been 21 casualties over this last period and over 500 people injured. There is a sense of trauma, compounding trauma in Israel, and I want to reassure her that we recognise that. Of course, the Prime Minister is discussing these issues with President Trump at this time, and I know the G7 meeting is going on as we speak. I want to reassure her also about our contact with hostages. That's why I was meeting with hostage families just today and undertaking to raise that issue again in this place. And what they asked me was to ensure that with this crisis we do not take our eye off the situation in Gaza, and that's why I made it a part of my statement. And she quite rightly asks about state threats from the Iranian regime and the IRGC. And can I refer her to the work of Sir John Hall? He has found gaps in our legislation framework in relation to how we deal with these state threats. I'm pleased about the arrests that have been made recently, but we will be coming forward with the appropriate legislation on dealing with state threats from the IRGC in the coming months.
Select Committee Chair Dame Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.